If you have donated and have not received your video, shoot me an email. Also, make sure to check your spam folder. Thank you. A subject at the pinnacle of the charlatan sciences is Egyptology. But today we're not here to discuss Egypt necessarily. We are here to discuss the Holy Land and how the Western United States of America fits perfectly into the biblical landscape based upon credible details given to us from Scripture. Speaking of landscape, it almost seems unfair to compare the landscape of modern day Israel to the Holy Land in America, but that is exactly what we are going to do. Our aim here is to demolish our opponents and annihilate those who choose to perpetuate sheepish fallacies for societal conformity. We arm ourselves from the trusted position of moral uprightness, along with the information necessary to ascertain the word, regardless of how the word is received by the receiver. We are armed with the discernment to recognize deception and the wisdom that accompanies the righteous pursuit. I'm not here to try to convince you of anything. I'm only here to show you what you've been missing. In the California episode, we detailed the legendary map of the island of California that all scholars and historians claimed was a mistake. According to them, the depictions on maps of California as an island were based off faulty intelligence, because as they put it, California had yet to be discovered. In the episode, I show several maps among the numerous available and how detailed and consistent they are between different cartographers and sources. If the maps were mistaken, then why are so many maps from different countries, cartographers, and chronological eras of the time so consistent? It seems impossible that so many different people from different times can make the exact same mistake. Nonetheless, we also highlighted the massive reservoir system of over 1,000 gargantuan dams holding back an entire sea of water. What would happen if these 1,500 plus dams all of a sudden failed? Better yet, what would happen if they had never been built? Would California look different than it does today? The entire San Joaquin Central Valley would be completely flooded overnight, leaving the majority of Central California under a sea of water. We've seen for ourselves the catastrophic floods and landslides over the past 3.5 years since I first made that episode almost seem prophetic. But really, it was just a matter of paying attention to nature and weather patterns. California weatherman legend Leon Hunsaker had long warned Californians about the impending disaster that could at any moment sink California, literally. But that may not even be the worst part, because the massive landslides may be an even greater threat to human life, because at any time, huge plots of land can collapse into the earth or even the ocean, leaving the unlucky buried under layers of earth or thrown into the sea. California, if left to its own natural devices, would look like a completely different place. Who remembers Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade? When I was a kid, that was like one of my favorite movies. So one of my favorite parts is when Indiana Jones has to go through the Holy Dungeon obstacle course and choose the Holy Grail. Remember, he got attacked by that old dusty Templar nigga? Anyway, I always thought that part of the movie was so deep, because he had to know all of these ancient gems in order to make it through the maze, to prove that he was worthy and, of course, save his father, Sean Connery, the great archaeologist. In the movie, they were supposed to be located in the Middle East. But you may be surprised to find that they actually filmed the majority of those scenes in the Western United States. The Middle East just didn't have the picturesque pizzazz they were looking for. But don't be mistaken, they still shot plenty of scenes in the Middle East, so it wasn't like they didn't have access to the Middle East sites. But when they needed a full landscape, they would film in the Western United States, and then later they would slap a notable Middle East location over the scene to make it seem more authentic. Like in the final scene of The Last Crusade, they used the ruins of Petra. This example goes to show you that Hollywood will spend an unreasonable amount of money to fabricate a scene. They could have just shot the entire thing in the Middle East, but they didn't. It's all about creating an illusion. The same thing could be said about world history. One of the most well-known characters from the Old Testament is King Solomon, and possibly one of the most well-known events from his lifetime was the construction of the temple, along with the construction of the house of the Forest of Lebanon. The architect of his complex was none other than Hiram, king of Tyre. If you remember from previous episodes, Hiram is a legendary figure in Freemasonry. It is commonly stated that the beginnings of Freemasonry were initiated with the construction of the Temple of Solomon. The reason why this tree is so significant on the eastern tree line of Nevada is that it is a great bristlecone pine. And of course, this tree was 5,000 years old, or more, or less. This tree and this tree's location is very significant. And why is this tree and this tree's location in Wheeler Park in eastern Nevada so significant? Because Methuselah in California is completely across the state, nearly on the border between what? California and the edge of Nevada. So we have these two ancient species of bristlecone pine trees on the edge of the desert. Isaiah 41:19. I will plant in the wilderness the cedar, the shittah tree, and the myrtle, and the oil tree, and I will set in the desert the fir tree, and the pine, and the box tree together. The pine. He will set in the desert the pine and the fir tree. Oh, what about the fir tree? It just so happens that fir trees grow right there in the middle of the desert. The fir tree in the desert.